So good morning, everyone. Just want to thank everybody for joining this presentation. As you can see, my age, everybody knows Robin. And every time Robin would say something, he would say, holy this Batman or whatever. So holy cyber Batman. It's kind of a play on that we're holy, talking about cyber, and the Batman is just kind of a little fun play. But the real context of this is staying safe in a hostile digital world. It is a very hostile digital world that's out there, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. And our key scripture that we're really going to be referring to is Hosea 4:6, is my people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. And we're going to talk about how that fits into the theme of what we're talking about here. All right. So before I move on, definitely want to just give some intro and acknowledgments. So this presentation and talk is being presented by our church, Discover Life Church. Where we're shepherded and led by Pastors Roy and Crystal Barrett, who I love dearly. He goes to Florida State. Well, he likes Florida State. I love Miami. So we got that one part and different. But other than that, we're brothers in Christ. So I love them dearly. And Crystal, she's just all around good people. So, I got no problem with her. But also one of our key mantras at Discover Life, as you can see on the shirt here, but also is that we believe in helping people discover their life in Christ, developing their potential, and then being deployed into a life of kingdom service. And in this talk, we'll, hopefully you'll discover some knowledge about, hold on one second, enter some people in, still coming in. You're going to discover some knowledge. You're going to help hopefully develop that knowledge into an action plan, and then you're going to deploy that knowledge into your life, and then also, share with others as you learn about it. That's one of the great things we love about security, is making sure we share information as we get it. I definitely want to give a great shout out and thanks to Dr. Deanne Johnson, who's the executive pastor at New Covenant Ministries, for just reaching out to a lot of the other pastors and leaders in the area to join on this call. We hope that many of you that have joined will get something out of this and kind of help guide your organization as we start engaging and utilizing more digital services for all kinds of different ways, right? We're doing things remotely, but also just using it on our daily services and daily activities. Want to make sure everybody is definitely safe in knowing that. So we're just going to start out with a real quick word of prayer, just kind of start it off. Obviously want to make sure that we bring God into this and make sure he's guiding everything that we're talking about. So Lord, we just want to thank you so much for this time. We want to thank you for this day that you have made. It is wonderful. Father, you are the creator of everything, even the digital environments that we are in, Father. And we pray, Father, that you would just help us and guide us in this talk. Help me to reflect accurately and effectively the information in such a way that it will touch everyone's heart to remain safe, but also to be effective in how they conduct your kingdom business. So we bless you and we honor you in Jesus' name. Amen. All right. And so going to go on. So here. All right. So just a little bit of, who am I, right? At me. So at home, I'm a husband and a father of 3. As you can see, those 3 precious babies, and not so big, not so much a baby, a big boy there. I'm also a husband to a beautiful wife, Melinda, who's also, we're family life directors and influential marriage leaders at Discover Life. And also at work or just in the industry, I've had about 25 years in the software development industry, about 6 years in cyber. And also, and I don't have it listed here, but I'm also the CEO of a company with my wife, 7 Square Solutions, where we offer, really just kind of custom tailored solutions, software solutions, and security solutions for people. Some of my interests are obviously marriage mentoring, because we lead the marriage ministry. I love doing that. I love baseball, so I coach baseball. I'm a little 4-year-old to coach T-ball, or as he's now, he calls it pee-wee ball, so I guess he's a little bit bigger. Definitely love traveling, and also like to just kind of do somewhat of a cyber evangelism, just kind of evangelizing different things about cybersecurity and helping people to stay safe. So that's a little bit about me, and we'll just kind of move on. So this will be the agenda for today. We're going to come through it kind of, I'll say quickly. I'll take my time, but definitely don't want to be respectful for everybody else's time. I want to make sure there's time afterwards for questions and answers. So we'll just kind of lay out the vision. Why are we talking about what we're talking about, right? Also, we're going to talk about, securing my digital world. Why should you care? Why should I care about securing my digital/cyber world? What we're going to do then is we're going to talk about 2 common myths that I've heard a lot in my in my walk in terms of learning about cyber, these 2 common myths, and we'll talk about those. Then we're going to talk about 3 ways that cyber criminals attack you. How do they come at you? You know, what are some real key things that you got to really look out for? Then obviously, once we kind of describe the problem, well, what can I do to protect myself? Those would be some key points. And then there'll be some time for question and answer afterwards. All right. So the vision. So as I started kind of planning this, I was really wanting to understand, you know, what is it we really want to accomplish and why are we doing this? And God laid on my heart, you know, Hosea 4:6, my people are destroyed for a lack of knowledge. And so really the vision is to create a well-informed, secure, and that's a key word, and responsible user community who can harness the power of God's technology, harness the power of technology for God's glory. And the essence, the purpose of this talk really is to inform you so that you can be empowered to be secure and responsible as you conduct your affairs online, whether it be personally, whether it be professionally, whether it be for the kingdom of God, just making sure that everybody stays safe in that process. And that's really the vision, right? So what I'm gonna do is move on to the next thing. What we're gonna do is we're gonna kind of set the landscape of really what is this whole cyber world kind of look like in terms of the different threats that are out there. So securing my digital and cyber world, why should I care? So some of these statistics kind of really are kind of tailored around like organizations, but they could be applied individually. So one of the key things it talks about is 95% of breached records or records that are stolen come from about 3 different core industries. And this is in 2016: government, retail, and technology. All of us are engaged in those spaces. All of us probably have a social security number or some form of government ID. All of us go and we shop and do things. That's retail. And obviously we're all on Zoom right now, so we're engaged in technology. Well, 95% of all the breach records come from those 3 core areas of technology, which means we're engaged in those areas, right? The thing that's also kind of, I wouldn't say scary, but it's concerning is that when companies get breached, on average, it takes about 6 months before the company even knows that they've been breached, right? Because these attackers, they live in a world of shadow, and you really don't see them when they're attacking your systems. Let's think about it from a financial perspective. So on average, it costs the company or some organizations upwards of $150 million when they have a data breach. So when you get a data breach, there's regulatory issues that come along with that. There are obviously financial impacts to the people, to your organization. There's reputation damage, all of that. When they average it out across all the different companies, it's roughly about $150 million per breach. And then when you talk a little bit about just the frequency, and you know, roughly every 39 seconds, there's some sort of attack or some sort of hacker or attack is occurring on some system somewhere. That's pretty mind-blowing when you think about it. I mean, in the course of this talk right now, you probably had about 5 of those breaches or 5 of those attacks that are occurring. And they're probably occurring even faster than that. Many of these numbers come from sources that probably maybe 2-3 years old, and you could be getting down to a cyber attack happening every second, depending on the type of system that you are. Also, you know, roughly $500 million. So this is 500 million. This is in 2018. The number of personal records stolen by malicious hackers in 2018. So these are things like personal social security numbers, information associated with, you know, your banking information, credit card information. Roughly $500 million were stolen in 2018. When you think about some of the breaches that occurred in the past, you know, we'll talk about some of those. That's all wrapped up in that. And that number continues to grow every year. So what does really all this mean to us, right? So Jeannie Rometty, I forgot, I don't know how to pronounce his last name, IBM's chairman and president and CEO said, cybercrime is the greatest threat to every company in the world. So imagine you take out company and you put in church organization or something like that, right? Anybody that engages in a digital sphere or some sort of digital world is threatened by this. And so that's really why we want to talk about this and why you should care, because everyone's pretty much involved in the cyber world. Okay. I'm still letting people in. So there are 2 common myths that I want to talk about. And the first myth kind of really goes to the first aspect of, well, I'm really a nobody. I mean, not saying I'm a nobody in Christ. I'm everything, right? But I'm not really a popular person in the world. So, hackers, they're not really after me. They're not really after my data, right? And it sounds like a reasonable question. It's a reasonable thought process. Well, unfortunately, that's false. And the reason why is they're not just after you, they're after everyone, right? So they're trying to cast a wide net and get a lot of people in. And the way that I illustrate this is, there was a really interesting book that I read a few years ago called Future Crimes. And the book is entitled Future Crimes because it's looking at what is crime and what do different things look like in the future. And it really revolves around cybercrime. So he gives a story, if you go back maybe 150 years during the age of the stagecoach, when stagecoaches would transport, large sums of money and gold between different banks and things like that. And if you were a robber, you would go after that. You would have to have a hardened crew that, with guns, and you had to get horses, and you'd have to get, find kind of stake out the stagecoach and how they're moving. Then you had to find a remote area to kind of take them down. Y'all probably wonder how I know all this, right? I read it in the book. I'm actually an honest guy. And then once you got there, then you'd have to go through a gun battle potentially. You'd probably lose some of your crew, probably potentially lose your own life. And then after all that, let's say you actually, you get the stagecoach. Now you got to transport this heavy gold and money out of the middle of nowhere somewhere to get it so that you can transfer it into money. So it was a lot of effort involved in terms of just doing major crime back then. And my son is trying to appear here. Go back, son. So let's fast forward 150 years, right? Now, an average cyber attacker can literally, in the comfort of their own home, press a button, reach out, and touch millions of people instantaneously, running 24/7 while they're asleep, right? And the way they do this is they utilize what's called smart bot technology. They utilize computer systems and programs running on computer systems around the world, right? So in different countries, in the United States, all over the place. And the point of these bots is literally to just go after you and get your data, right? That's the main reason why they do it. So basically, hackers use probably thousands of millions of these automated bots. And bots are basically just little software programs that are running in different environments that are just, their sole purpose is to just constantly go after and try to steal your data. And they're doing it 24/7, 365 days a year. And there's little to no effort. Remember, I talked about all the person is doing is pushing a button and sending that bot off to do the work. And they're using that automation to do that kind of stuff. So you're not just no one in the cyber world. You're just like everybody else. They're casting a wide net and they're trying to get as many people as they can. So myth number 2. So, and this I've heard this before. I don't really use the internet that much. So, there's really not that much information out there about me, really, right? Well, unfortunately, that too is false. So when I was doing some research, this particular website came up, techjury.net, and they had this particular quote. It said, in 2020, every person will generate 1.7 megabytes in 1 second. So before we talk about that, because I want to give a really good illustration of how big that is, let's just talk about, well, where does that 1.7 megabytes of information, where does that go? So sources of data out there about you, public records, right? There are public records out there that are court records, all kind of different things. If you've bought a house, there's probably information out there about it, right? If you've gone and you actually have an address, there's probably, remember we used to have the white pages, or many of you that used to actually go and open up a real, physical paper book and call it the white pages. Well, that's all been digitized, right? So there's a whitepages.com out there where all your information, your name, your address, potentially your phone number, if those are things that are on public record, those are out there, right? Government records. So there's some government systems out there. Hopefully the government are securing those systems. They've actually had breaches of government systems in the past as well, but social security numbers, census information, information about your voting record, things like that. That stuff is out there. Financial and banking records. Most of us utilize a bank to store our money. right? Those systems have been digitized. If you ever use a credit card, your information is out there, right? Social media, that's a really big one. Social media, many of us participate in social media. We use it as a way to communicate our message out, to connect with other folks. But let's just say you didn't have a social media account. Let's say you didn't have a Facebook account. If you've ever been around anyone and they've taken a picture, let's say of their kid, excuse me for a second. You guys, Kai and EJ, go out. I'm on a call, please. I'm sorry. COVID kids, we're still dealing with it. But you know, if you've ever, like, someone's taken a picture of someone else and you happen to get caught up in that picture, guess what? That's a part of that 1.7 megabytes every second. All right. So we're not immune from that. We truly are caught up in different things. And even stuff like, doorbell cameras. You go over to someone's house, you go to press their doorbell, guess what? They got an image or a video of you. So that information is out there. So let's just give some perspective on just how much information the average person has collected in a year. So when I did the calculations, I called up Pastor Crystal yesterday and said, how big is, DLC? And she told me the size. And I said, okay, now if I were to take this 1.7 megabytes per second and calculate that out, average book has about 400,000 characters, letters and characters in it. So there's about 4 books worth of data that each one of us generate in 1 second. And then if you take that and you amalgamate that over an entire year, we could literally take 12 buildings worth of DLC, 13 buildings worth of DLC, and fill every nook and cranny with a book. And that's how much information is generated on us every year. Just let that sink in, right? That's roughly 120 million books a year worth of information that's produced on you, right? And it could fill 13 buildings the size of DLC today. That's a phenomenal amount of data that is generated on us. And most of the time, a lot of these companies like Facebook and Google, they offer these free services, but what they really want is they want your data, because they want to build profiles and mine you and figure out how you shop and how you do things so they can sell that information to other companies. So this is really a myth. I don't really use the internet that much. If you engage in society in any way or fashion, you're part of the internet. Unless you live on an island somewhere in the middle of the ocean, with no connection, maybe that works. But, even with Google Maps, there's probably a picture of you on that island if you're out there somewhere. So it's you just can't get away from it. It's just the world we live in today. So just hope that those two myths were kind of covered there and kind of, just kind of go over the basis. So, with all that said, what are some ways that now that we understand there's a lot of data out there on us, and we really are like this wide net target of cyber criminals. What are some of the different ways that they attack you? And this is obviously not an exhaustive list of methods that cyber criminals use to attack you, but these are some really common ones. And so what we're going to do is we're going to talk about what that attack method is. How do cyber criminals come at you? And then some real world examples, so that we're not just saying this isn't just theory. These are actually real world events that are occurring. So for example, stealing login credentials. What we mean by login credentials, many of us have emails. We log into it with our email address and our password, or we logged into Zoom with an email address and a password, or we log into our bank. That's what I mean by login credentials, right? So one core breach that occurred back in 2018, many of us may have used this particular site called MyFitnessPal. I love it. It's a great app. Allows you to track all your calories. In COVID, we're eating too much. I'm probably way over my calories already. But it's a really great site. But in 2018, roughly 150 million user accounts were compromised, and they got the usernames and the passwords, right? So which means that they got that entire database of everybody's username and password. So why does that matter? Well, guess what? I'm gonna give you a personal story that happened to me that actually is related to this. So in 2019, July of 2019, I'm with my family. We're on a trip in Destin. And the kids say, Daddy, we want to watch a movie on Netflix. So I said, sure. So I go to turn on the movie. I can't log in. I'm wondering what's going on. Why can't I log into my Netflix account? I just logged in a few days ago. It was no problem. And I keep trying to log in, and I'm like, something's up. Something's weird. This is not normal. So let me log into my email and see if there's any messages from Netflix about maybe the payment didn't go through because I had it on auto payment. I don't know. When I looked in there and I searched for Netflix, all of a sudden I see these emails saying that on that same day at roughly about 2:30 in the afternoon, someone logged into my Netflix account from Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. Like, what? Who logged into my account from Malaysia? And approximately 20 minutes later, someone logged in to my account from Egypt. And there they attempted to change my password, or they actually did change my password, and they changed the email that was associated with the account. Now, that sounds kind of crazy, right? I know it wasn't an individual person, because when the email information was changed and when the password was changed, it was done within the span of seconds. Obviously, a human being can't interact with a computer that fast. But that was one of those automated bots. So then as I started researching, I got my account, restored and got everything taken care of. And the kids were happy. They were watching their, cartoon, some kind of a Disney cartoon or something. I went back and researched and found out. And I said, well, how did that happen? How in the world did, my information did they get logged into my account? And it turns out that this breach, this MyFitnessPal breach, was the main reason why it happened, because I had reused the same password, the same username and same password that I used for MyFitnessPal, I used in Netflix. And so guess what? They take that 150 million user account, they run it through this automated software system called a bot, and they reach out and they try to touch as many other different other services that you potentially could use to see if they can log in with those credentials. That's called credential stuffing. And that happens a lot because we use weak passwords, right? We'll talk about how we alleviate that. The next item we want to talk about are phishing emails or phishing phone calls. Many of you have heard these as scam calls, right? This is by far the most effective way that attackers come at you. It's a method called social engineering. I want to engineer a specific way that I can talk to you or communicate to you to get you to do something that you normally wouldn't do. And one particular event that occurred is the Target data breach in 2014, where roughly 70 million customers were affected. And you can always go look at these links to go get the information. But in essence, what happened is that someone within the Target workforce had got an email from someone. They had no idea it was. It looked legitimate, and they clicked on a link. And when they clicked on that link, it proceeded to install software on their system that then started reaching out to other systems within the Target network and began to infect those systems. And once they got to a system that had something of value, typically data on customers, they then slowly siphoned or just kind of extracted that data out under the radar until it all happened. So typically, when these type of breaches occur, from the time of infection into a computer, it could be 3 to 4 years before all the data is siphoned out. All right? Because the attackers don't want to look obvious. So what they do is they kind of meld themselves into the normal flow of traffic and data going in and out of your network. So you just doesn't look nefarious at all. It just looks normal. But that's how attackers will work. And they do that through phishing emails or phone calls. And we'll talk about how you alleviate that as well. And then the last thing in 3 ways that cyber or criminals attack you is through out-of-date software and programs on your computer. And you may have heard this as viruses or malware or ransomware. You may have heard that as well. Another real big one that happened here in Atlanta, is actually 2 of them that happened here in Atlanta. But the one that was really kind of had the most major effect was the Equifax breach in 2017. So many of you that have gotten any type of credit know that Equifax is one of the premier companies that stores just large amounts of really personal, financial, work history, different names, all that stuff, medical data. They have a lot of data on you because they use that data to determine if you're going to get credit. Other creditors use that information to make decisions about whether to give you credit, whether to get a car loan, whether to get a house loan, whether to get anything like that, right? In fact, some employers actually use Equifax data to make a determination they're going to hire you, right? So Equifax was breached in 2017. It roughly affected 148 million records. So that's roughly half the country, half the population of the United States was swept up, and this information was stolen on roughly 148 million people. And it got a lot of attention. I've been to so many security conferences, and when people mention the word or the name Equifax, people cringe, they're starting to regain their credibility now. They've done a lot of great things to alleviate this. But the main reason why this happened was because they had a system that was in their network and had sat there for an extended period of time with bad, old, outdated software. And they knew it, right? That's part of the reason why in the lawsuit, they had to pay a lot of money. It was negligence on their part. They knew that the software was old. They hadn't patched it. There was a security flaw in the patchwork, and the attackers took advantage of it. And so they basically installed some malicious software onto the server and extracted the data out over a long period of time. And that's a pretty common thing as well. Now, you might say, well, these are major companies, right? How does that affect me? Well, these same things apply to an individual. Every individual has login credentials, right? Every person probably gets emails or gets phone calls on their phone. And so when someone's trying to socially engineer you in that case, and then we all have computers. Obviously, we're all on Zoom right now. We're using some form, whether it be your phone or whether it be an actual computer or a tablet. They're all the same. They all require software to work. And so it's important that we make sure that we keep our software updated. So with that, we're going to move on to, okay, now you've got my attention, Eric. So what's next, right? So what can I do to protect myself? So we're going to take these three same examples again and kind of go through what are some potential solutions that we can use to protect ourselves. There's good news in this. The first one is login credentials. In order to make it difficult for attackers to steal your login credentials or to breach into your accounts, you got to have complex passwords. And what do I mean by complex passwords? Passwords that are not easily broken through what we call brute force attacks, where I can take a computer and I can just keep randomly guessing what that password is until they figure it out. And in today's standards, with all the computing technology out there, this is on kind of on the lower end, lower to middle end in terms of complexity, but usually a unique 8 to 12 character complex password. What does that mean? Numbers, letters, different crazy characters, things like that. That would make up a good password, right? And the other thing that's really key, because go back to when I talked about my Netflix example, I reused a password for 2 different accounts. That is one of the major no-nos that you do when you're managing passwords. Every account that you have should have a unique password. And the reason why you want to do that is that if one gets breached, then they've got to go through the whole process to try to figure out the other one. Now, why would, let's say I'm not trying to actually break your password. I just steal it from another database, like in the case of MyFitnessPal. So the attackers didn't have to figure out my password. They just had to steal it from someone else and then just reuse it. And so that's why it's important not to reuse passwords. But that might seem very cumbersome and just not convenient. I mean, the human memory, we're not very good at remembering, crazy complex passwords to remember just one, but then also to remember, potentially 10, 20, dozen. In my case, I probably have, 250 to almost 300 different accounts that I've just collected over the years, just different things that I've logged in and done, whether it be conferences or something that I've learned, some training, maybe Amazon. I've got a lot of different accounts that I manage, even with the stuff we do at our church. I found this really great tool that I started using a few years ago called LastPass, which is what's called a password manager. And the idea behind a password manager like LastPass is to say, hey, all you have to do is remember one complex password. It doesn't have to be complex. It can be a long phrase or something that but once you remember that, everything that you store in that password manager is then secured through what's called encryption. And that encryption basically scrambles all your information using your one key password so that no one can steal it, but it stores all that information for you. And then it very easily integrates in when you go on your web browser and you go to, discoverlife.com and discoverlife.org, excuse me. And you let's say you log in to pay your tithes or something like that. LastPass will automatically pull those credentials based on where you're logged in and place them into the appropriate fields for you. And it just makes it so much easier. It has really been a life changer for me. The other thing I love about LastPass is that it provides me a very effective way of kind of inventorying just how many different websites that I've been to or login credentials that I have, right? It allows me to store things like, my social security numbers for my family. It allows me to store other things like you might have bank card information. Like if you lose your card and you don't know the number, you can at least store that information in there, and it does it all very securely through that encryption process. The one key thing though, don't ever lose your password if you use it, because if you lose your master password, you can't get back in, and they can't recover it because they don't know, right? Another thing which is really good is knowing how have any of my emails been involved in a breach. There's a really good kind of, see right here, this guy called haveibeenpawned.com. It's a database that kind of scours the dark web. Well, dark web is basically all where the cyber attackers live. It's a whole separate entity. It's actually larger than the internet, the traditional internet we see today. And I'm not going to go too much in that, but in these different dark web systems where they steal this information and they store it in these servers in what they call the dark web. This particular system called Have I Been Pawned, what it does is it goes out and reaches out to those different systems and checks and says, do you have this particular username and password in your database? And if it says yes, it says you might have been involved in a potential breach. That's actually how I found out about MyFitnessPal, because I went to this website, typed in my email, and saw that my email actually had been compromised at MyFitnessPal. So it's a really good way. It gives you visibility into knowing, where have I been involved in a breach. And I'll provide these slides later on so that you can go back and click in these links. Looks like we might have got a chat here. So Gary McCrae says, wouldn't that raise a flag to the hackers? No. So the reason why is that the hackers, what they do is they sell the information, they get their money, and they move on, right? So they don't care if somebody goes and find out if they got a hold of the fact that they stole something. They're just about making the money, right? And there's so many other different servers out there that once you sell the information, it gets copied thousands and millions of times to other different systems. Sometimes these companies like Have I Been Pawned will set up their own systems and act and kind of masquerade as if they're dark attackers or they're dark web attackers. And people say, oh, I'm going to sell the information to you. And then they'll get the information. And then what they do is they use it in an ethical way. But that's a very good question. So going on to the next item, phishing emails and phone calls. So I'm pretty sure many of you have gotten a crazy phone call or some kind of crazy email. And one of the key things about phishing emails specifically is that attackers are becoming much, much more effective and sophisticated on how they're crafting their emails to make them look legitimate. They're using logos of the actual company. They're writing things that what they may do is they may research LinkedIn and go look at specific officers or look at leadership in that company and use that information, address information, title, responsibilities. They'll try to use that wording. You might, someone might share different ways that they do things in the company to make themselves, and then what the attackers will do will pull that information and say, this is relevant. Let's talk about, hey, we just had this one campaign going on. Would you be willing to donate to the campaign? And you go on LinkedIn and you're like, yeah, they do have a campaign going on. But what the attackers are doing is that they're siphoning that information, they're reconnaissing that information, and then they're putting it into their emails to make it look as legit as possible, right? And then what they do is they embed some sort of web link into that email to get you to click on it. And that's what starts the entire chain. Once you click on that link, that process, if you don't have appropriate protection on your computer, which is talking about out-of-date software and programs, we'll talk about that in a minute, it will then infiltrate your computer and then start infecting your computer and looking to do things like stealing information. Perhaps one of the biggest things that a lot of these types of attacks do is they install what's called ransomware. Ransomware is really nasty. It actually affected the city of Atlanta's criminal justice system several years ago when Mayor Lance Bottoms first became the mayor, and they had an attack on Atlanta. And what this basically boils down to is the software literally gets on your computer and encrypts your entire hard drive. It locks you out from all of your data, and then it sends up this nasty message that says, "Hey, you better pay us $300. You're never getting access to your data again." And so, some people pay the money, but then sometimes attackers don't even give you the information. They say, "Oh, well, maybe you got to pay some more," and they kind of just leave you in this perpetual limbo of basically keeping your data hostage. That's why they call it ransomware. But those kind of things. But how do you guard yourself against phishing emails? So number one, if you get, I like the term trust but verify, right? So you get an email that comes in, it may look legit, but let's just verify it. Let's say it's from one of your friends and it's got a link in it. You know what? Maybe we ought to call that individual and say, "Hey, did you send me this email with this link to watch this YouTube video?" "Oh yeah, I did that." Okay, maybe it's safe to go ahead and click on the link. But it's always better to be a little bit cautious than to just click on a link because someone sends it to you, because you may not know where that link will take you. Don't give out sensitive information to random callers or email requests. This still works. There are a lot of people that still fall for this because the attackers are so much more sophisticated in how they deliver their message to you. They sound legit, but I can guarantee you a bank or financial institution will not contact you directly and say, "I need you to divulge personal information to me." The only time they ask for that personal information is if you initiate the call to say, "I need support on XYZ. Okay, sir or ma'am, I need you to identify yourself. Can you please tell me this?" And they also, what they do is they only ask you to provide limited information. So instead of saying, "Supply me hey, give me your entire social security number," just give me the last four of your social security number. Tell me what your zip code is. And they take those bits and pieces of information together and say, "Okay, this person truly is who they say they are." But they never ask for full information, and they never are going to call you and say, "I need you to provide this information. We've got this money sitting here. I need you to give me this information." If you get a call or you get an email like that, delete it, drop it, block it, do whatever you need to do, right? One of the great things I think is important too, and this is something in the security world we really talk a lot about, is training. We firmly believe that it's important that the more knowledge you spread, which is hence why we talked about my lack of knowledge is why my people perish, as we said in Hosea 4:6. The more knowledge people have about how attackers come at them, the more secure people will be, right? You cannot rely upon one centralized system to protect you. You have to make sure that you're doing your part to protect yourself. The same way you lock your doors at night and you know that you can't rely upon the police or somebody else to come and protect your house for you. You've got to protect your home. Same thing we have to do with our digital world. We have to be mindful of how these attacks are occurring and what can we do to protect ourselves. So there's a good phishing training video I've included in this, and you can go back and look at it. And the last thing is out-of-date software and programs. Now, what's really great, in days past when I started, there wasn't as much automation. You had to kind of go get a CD and put the CD in and update your. So you were really manually responsible for updating the software in your systems. But more likely now, most computers and even phones, those updates happen regularly and they happen automatically. So that's a big burden that's lifted off of us. However, there are times where I've seen, even the case, I joke with my wife, she'll get a message come up on her phone that says, "A new system update is available." And she's like, "I don't want to put that on my phone. It's going to break everything." And so she intentionally doesn't install the software, and I have to get on her and say, "Babe, remember I talked to you about, attackers can take advantage of your phone or your computer if you don't put the software up there." "Okay, all right, I'll put it on." She does it reluctantly, but it's so important to keep your software updated. Why? Because attackers are trying to take advantage of vulnerabilities and flaws in your software and your systems. So companies are trying to stay ahead of the curve. I mean, there's literally thousands of viruses a day that are coming out, and companies are always trying to stay a step ahead of those as best they can to make sure that their software and their systems are not vulnerable to that. So when you get an update, like say, for example, Zoom, we're using Zoom now. There recently have been some security concerns about Zoom. People call what's called Zoom booming. People will just jump into people's meetings and start posting all kind of nefarious stuff or taking over their meetings. Zoom has recently released several fixes to address that. And every time we log into Zoom, there would be an update that would come up and it says, hey, we've got this update. Would you like to do it? Software companies are always going to provide you an option to do that, but it's all usually best to just go ahead and let the automated system do it. So what can you do? Make sure you keep those automated updates going and pay attention to any alerts that are coming up from your software that says an update is available. Would you like to install it? Just go ahead and install it. And there's a great video out there that talks about, I'm a big Windows user, so I'm really kind of just fond of Windows. But there's a really big, there's a nice video out there that talks about how do you do that. It takes you through it step by step. How do you make sure that your updates are on for Windows? All right. So I know I've said a lot. I definitely want to be mindful. We've got about 15 minutes, 15, 20 minutes left. And so what I want to do is I'm going to go ahead and move on to any questions, a Q&A session. I'm going to go ahead and unmute, and then you can ask me any questions that you like. And if we need to have a separate session later on to ask any additional questions for those of you that might have some more sensitive questions or something like that, I can definitely make myself available. I'll put my email. In fact, what I'll do now is I'll put my email here. Everybody can have my email. Just give me 1 second. I will update this presentation. Discover Life. Okay, let's do a save and hit F5. And hopefully you should all be able to see my email now. And let's go here. So yes. All right, so I'm gonna unmute. Can you all see my email? Let me go into the last one here. So there we go. Come on, Myth. There we go. Can you all see my email?
Yes.
All right, cool.
Yes.
All right. So I'll be happy to take any questions over the next 15 minutes. If anybody has any, just state your name and your question, please.
Eric, I have a question. This is Jasmine.
Hey, Jasmine. Go ahead.
So with me being a nurse and being in the healthcare field, I always think about how these types of things can affect the healthcare sector, knowing that COVID has caused such an increase in hospitals admissions and, exposure. What's the risk right now with healthcare sectors being vulnerable to breaches?
Yeah, that's a good question. So definitely what has happened is that in any crisis, let me move this over here. In any crisis, attackers like to take advantage of those times of crisis. Health record information, HIPAA information is really a very valuable commodity in what we call the data brokering. So there's always an increased risk in those types of fields, but that risk is always there, right? I think what's really important is that as a nurse and as a medical professional, we're kind of changing the way we're sharing information. We're not being as up close and personal because people are not coming in. And so we're utilizing a lot of these digital services. In fact, I actually used the one for a doctor appointment. And what's imperative, and one of the reasons why I gave this talk is that you be mindful of the type of, different what they call video sharing systems that doctors are using for hosting those calls. There are potential vulnerabilities in those systems. That's why it's important that you make sure that your system is as up to date as possible, that you're not getting, if you see an email, let's say from what looks like a medical provider, hey, I need you to click on this link. We got to ask you one more question about your last appointment, right? And like, I didn't have any appointment. What are they talking about? Don't click on the link, right? But even if they do, the best thing I would say to do is maybe call your doctor and say, hey, I got an email stating that I need to click on this link to reestablish the session with you. You sure I need to do that? And like, I didn't call you. Then you know, right? So that's part of the reason why it's really important. But this, the heightened sense of attacks is definitely there in the time of COVID. There's so many different news stories that talk about a lot of different attackers and nation states even trying to take advantage of this time. So yeah, that is definitely there.
Yeah.
You all should be able to unmute yourself. Is that correct? I think you are.
Yes, you
Okay, I
can.
wanted to make sure I took that feature off.
Yeah.
Thank you, Gary, for that information.
Well, thank you for explaining that for me. That
Absolutely.
shed some insight.
Yeah.
Eric, I have a question. Well,
Okay.
actually, I have two. This is
This
Sharon.
is Sharon. How are you doing?
Yeah. So one is so if you you spoke about your Fitness Pal and Netflix,
Mhm.
and so if you find maybe if a company was breached, how can you check to see if your information was included in that? Is there
Sure.
a way?
Sure. Okay, so you see this, see where it says check your creds here? Right,
Okay.
right here. So
Gotcha.
there's this website called Have I Been Pawned?
Uh-huh.
And you can basically put in your email information. And when you put that in, you hit enter, it'll go out and it'll do a search and it says, yep, you've been involved in a potential data breach.
Okay.
And that's how I found out about MyFitnessPal. There are other ones out there that kind of do something similar. I found this one to be the most reputable one in terms of just its comprehensiveness, and also the fact that their mission really is to inform and not to try to, kind of act as some kind of broker to say, well, if you pay $5 more, I'll get you even more information. No, they don't do that.
And if you just one, then I'm done.
Sure. No problem.
So with reference to the LastPass, the password managers, how difficult is it if you want to get all of your passwords or all of your information in there to switch? Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, sure. So one of the things that's really great about the LastPass manager that I use is that as you log into systems, it automatically collects that information for you and stores it.
Okay.
So let's say that you log into your bank and you put in username and password, or say, hey, you haven't visited this site. Would you like to store this information in LastPass? And then you collect it and it's stored there, right? Then you go on to the next one and you collect it. So it's not as if you have to kind of go seed it per se with all the information. You can seed it just through your normal activity. Or you can also go in and just, add in entries. It's fairly easy to do in terms of, it's a very intuitive user interface. But it's also it's very intuitive in terms of making it easy for you to collect that information organically as you do your normal browsing and navigation. It doesn't take that long to do it. The main thing I think is really important, Sharon, is making sure you get your most critical passwords in there and then get them changed. And the reason why is that if you happen to go to Have I Been Pawned and your password has been potentially breached, doesn't mean that someone's gotten into your account. It just means they have the ability to potentially do that, right? So you're probably one of 150 million people. Maybe they just didn't get around to you yet, but eventually they will. And so to secure yourself, usually what I'll typically do is any account that I know that I may have had to reuse a password, I'll go into LastPass and update those passwords and then go that route. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
Sure. All right.
I have a question.
Yes.
Yes. Eric, this is Daniel.
How you doing, Daniel?
I'm doing good. How about yourself?
Good.
This was informative. Thank you so much for taking the time out to teach us concerning cybersecurity.
You're welcome.
And I have a question because is it the moment that we insert any information, whether we are having any internet activity, is it that it's easily accessed by those outside? And how can we think like a cyber criminal without indulging in their activities, but it's more so to prevent them from breaching or having any access to our personal information? Yeah,
that's a good question. It's just funny, when I got my master's in cyber back in 2014, I fought with this ethical dilemma of Lord, I don't want to think like an attacker. I don't want to think like a malicious person, so I kind of felt bad about it. But then I wrapped my mind around, you have to know thine enemy, right? You have to know how people are going to attack you in order to protect yourself. And so one of the ways is obviously there's tons of just really good free training out there, right? So some of the
Mhm.
training that I offer to talk about how do you know what a phishing attack looks like? How do you know if you've been involved in a breach? The great thing about the security community is that they provide a breadth of information and tools to allow you to learn. And I can, get your information later and send you some links on that. What's amazing about that is that the very same information that that attackers use to attack you with, people who are ethical like myself, we communicate that same information in a way that is digestible by the average user, so that they can protect themselves. I like to think of information security more so as like risk management, right? We all make risk-based decisions. There's this really great cartoon that shows this man, and he's looking at this chasm, and inside that chasm there's all these spikes, right? And so if the chasm's like really small and it's not really deep, and the impact associated with that is the likelihood I'm going to fall into that chasm and get hurt is low, right? But then there's the other part of the aspect where the chasm is really large, right? And there's spikes all down there, and it's really deep. And if I try to jump off there and try to go across that chasm, the likelihood that I'm going to get hurt is really high, and the impact that it's going to happen is it's probably going to kill me, right? And so you're always managing those two dynamics of likelihood and impact, right? And so we make those decisions every day when we get in our car. We do it instinctively, we don't realize it. The key with cybersecurity is being mindful that you need to make those risk-based decisions. So when you say, I want to click on a link, you're really saying, well, what's the impact?
Right.
Okay. All right. So if that's the impact, well, what's the likelihood? Well, did it come from a really untrusted source, or did it come from a trusted source? Well, the likelihood that it came from a trusted source is probably low because I trust that person. Doesn't mean there's 100% no risk, but it means the risk is a lot lower. Versus if it comes from some person claiming to be from a different country, like Russia, Ukraine, or something like that, I might not want to click on that link, right? It's probably likelihood that's going to be a hack, and the impact is probably going to be high. Does that make sense, Daniel?
Yes, it does. Thank you so much for answering. That's all I have.
No, you're welcome. Great question.
Hey, I have a question.
Sure.
Hi, I'm Tina McCray.
Oh, how you doing, Tina? I saw Gary there. Okay.
Yes, he's back there too.
How you doing, Gary?
This is great. Thank you, Eric, and to the pastors of Discover Life for offering this training.
You're welcome.
I have two questions. Number one of the biggest things I have a concern about is somebody getting into my machine and tracking and they're behind the scenes tracking what I'm doing, and I can't tell. And I'm not sure if have I been pawned would tell me that, but I always wonder about that, how to know if somebody's has gained access to your machine and you don't know. So you're going into your bank accounts and stuff like that.
So that's a valid concern, and those kind of cases have happened. I will tell you this, that more modern operating systems, for example, Windows, are much more hardened in their capability from preventing those types of things. The way that typically attackers come into your computer is not through a brute force attack trying to hack into your operating system. That's where the phishing emails come into play. You become an agent to allowing yourself to be infected. It's literally like saying, I'm just going to unlock my door, right? So when that's why we talk about the social engineering and the phishing attacks, why it's so important to be mindful that you click on a link, because when you click on that link, you're now providing access to your system. But in terms of someone just from the outside just hacking into your computer, it's very difficult to do that. In fact, most attackers don't even try that route. Because it's so difficult. I mean, you literally have to have millions and millions of dollars of research to be able to find that one little small flaw or crack in a system in today's world. The other thing that's really great about systems like Windows and even Mac, they have a lot of built-in antivirus software. Windows has a system called Windows Defender that builds in, and that helps to protect against viruses. The design and the construction of operating systems has been done in such a way that it mitigates probably 99% of all the different viruses and things that are out there, even the ones that are newly created. The other thing I would say, and this is something that I do, is I use a combination of the Windows Defender tool that it comes free with a Microsoft operating system, but also I use a tool called Malwarebytes, and I'm pretty sure Pastor Roy and Pastor Crystal know a lot about this. I talk about it all the time. Pastor Roy's always calling me, this malware bites is telling me it's got an update. Am I supposed to do that? So I've kind of got him trained to to kind of trust but verify. He'll contact me. I say, yeah, it's good. Go ahead and apply the update. But what malware bites does is that it specifically is geared towards watching for malware. And it knows, it monitors locally on your system. It monitors what websites you might be hitting.
Mm-hmm.
And so let's say you go to CNN.com, and behind the scenes, CNN has some flaw in their system, and it tries to load into your computer. Because when you go to a website, you click on one link, you don't realize that behind the scenes there's a whole bunch of thousands of other links that are being loaded in your system, images and stories and things like that. And so what the malware bites does is it monitors every one of those connections and says, there's something that tried to get loaded onto your system, like adware, and it says you might not want this. I'm going to block it. Right now, you can say I do want to allow it. It gives you that privilege of doing it, but it's monitoring your web traffic to make sure that you're not going to get infected. So I would rest easy knowing that no one's just going to intentionally be able to break into your system. However, you do want to take precautions. You want to monitor your phishing technique, monitor your phishing emails and things like that. And you also want to be very, very wary when you get on public Wi-Fi's, right? So you go into different, whether it be hospitals or other different areas. You want to be mindful of getting onto public Wi-Fi's because they do have people that literally have devices sitting on those networks looking for open systems to try to infect. So those are some different things. But if you're using it at your house, you're pretty much okay as long as you don't click on anything crazy. That's all I got to say.
I won't. My second question is, thank you. Once you discover, let's say we go on this, have I been pawned, or you discover, I use AVG, so I have support with them. But if you discover on one of these, have I been pawned, what do you recommend? Is there a service that we should use? Of course, your service, or some things we should do immediately? What are some things we do to once you've been hacked? What's the action we take?
Okay, so that's a very good question. How do I recover, right? So the first thing you need to do is imagine if, someone's coming at your house. I like to use, those type of things. First thing is you got to lock your doors. You got to change your locks, right? If someone's stolen your keys to your house, you change your locks. That's changing your passwords, right? Getting LastPass installed on your system and immediately go to wherever that is and change that password. That's really critical. Number two, and this is really another really great, in fact, I actually use it on all my accounts, really my critical accounts. There's another method called two-factor authentication. And I'm gonna explain what two-factor authentication is. So let's say you log into your bank, you put in your username and password, and then it says, hey, you put in this 6-digit code. I'm gonna send this code to your phone and put in this 6-digit code. That's what's called, what they call two-factor or multi-factor authentication. And here's what it does. If for some reason your username or password had been hacked, this attacker has to go through a secondary level of authentication of verifying that they are who they say they are. And what you do is you say, okay, you got my username and password, but you don't have my phone, so you don't know what that 6-digit code is. And you're not going to have enough time to figure out that 6-digit code because it expires in about 3 minutes, right? Two-factor authentication combined with great username and password is probably the most effective way of keeping your accounts from being breached. And it stops pretty much everything, right? So I would recommend that if you go onto the site, Have I Been Pawned, and you discover that your account has been breached, the first thing you need to do is find a way I don't know if you've kept a catalog of all the different websites out there that you've used that same username and password, but you're going to have to go through each one of those and get those passwords changed. And I would use LastPass to help you get that catalog. You can use it to generate very complex passwords and get those changed. Number two, for anything that is considered to be a sensitive account, a bank account information, medical records, if the system offers multi-factor authentication, you absolutely want to get that onto your system. That stops most attackers dead in their tracks because these bots that we talked about that kind of just go out and automatically what's called credential stuffing. If they hit that two-factor layer, they can't get past it because they don't have access to your phone. Now, somebody gets access to your phone and also access to and that's happened. It's very rare, but they get access to your phone and to your computer. That's a potential way. But you want to make it as hard as possible for the attacker to come at you, right? And that's that whole idea of what we talked about, the risk matrix, right? The impact is really high if someone breaks into my bank account. So I want to make the likelihood very, very low so that the overall risk is low, right? And the way you do that is you put security controls in place, like very complex passwords and multi-factor authentication. So that's what I would recommend you do. All right. I think you're on mute there. Do you have any more questions, Tina?
Oh, thank you. I guess one other question was, does all the stuff that you taught us, I'm sure it applies to our phones as well, because nowadays we're getting all these clicks through WhatsApp. And somebody sent me something yesterday talking about Costco was offering $125 free groceries, and you click on, and I was like, no way.
No.
So then I'm getting clicks from Walmart and CVS and text messages, because people are, I think, taking advantage of people with COVID.
Yes, right.
I don't know if what you talked about covers us from our mobile access capabilities as well.
You're talking about from your phone?
Yes, our phone.
Yeah. So a lot of what I talked about are principles that can also be used in your phone. So let's say, for example, keeping your phone updated with the proper software. That's the same thing. Our phones are amazing devices in terms of their computing power. A typical phone today probably had the computing power of 1,000 of the NASA Apollo 11 computers that actually took them into the moon. They're amazing pieces of engineering. And so, yes, they're just as complex as computers, which means they need to also be protected as well. In fact, they are probably more vulnerable because there's so many of them, right? There's this whole new world called the Internet of Things, where you've got things like GPS tracking on your phone, you've got cameras, you've got microphones, and people attackers are desperately trying to get access to those devices so that they can spy on you and do things like that. Now, I don't want to necessarily, cause a panic and, generate like conspiracy theories type things. These things are real, but there are definitely a lot of different things you can do to protect yourself, which is why these types of talks happen. And I would encourage you, go back and look at a lot of the different training videos, explore other ones out there. The key of this particular talk and others like it is to empower you, number one, to make you aware of what's going on, but also number two, to empower you on what steps can I take to really secure myself. And the more knowledge and the more information that people have, the better they'll be able to protect themselves. And I definitely encourage what you've learned here, share it with others. It's so important. The more people are aware of what's going on and how they're attacked, the better we can all protect ourselves through this process. So I got time for one more question, and then we'll move on. Go ahead, Daniel.
I have a question. What about pop-up ads? Is that something that we had to be careful of?
Yeah, I actually I recommend this for pop-up ads. There's a really great browser out there. If any of you are familiar with Google Chrome, I use Google Chrome extensively in the past, but I use another browser called Brave, Brave. You look that up. And what Brave does is that it has a very similar, it literally is built on top of the same framework that Google Chrome is, but it does a lot of great job of blocking adware, right? It blocks a lot of those ads that pop up in your when you go to a news website, or if you go to one of your favorite social media sites. It does a great job of blocking a lot of that stuff. It ensures that connections or what is called HTTPS, or what they call secure connections. What HTTPS means is that all the information between your computer and the server is encrypted when it's sent out onto the internet. And there these browsers typically, like Brave, they try to make sure that anytime you connect with the internet, it's always done through an encrypted connection. So there are a lot of different tools out there to do that. But to answer your question specifically, Daniel, I would definitely go with something like Brave to block all those adwares, because you do have to be mindful of it. Adware is funny because what adware does is that's like a service to try to target you to go buy something, right? So these companies like Facebook and Google and Twitter and Instagram, they're collecting this information about what you're browsing and what you're looking at, and they're trying to make determinations using like artificial intelligence on the back end to say, that person really, really likes cars. I'm going to start sending them ads with cars, right? Okay. And that's what adware does. It's just the nature of the world that we live in. It's literally it's changed the way that advertising has worked. And it's, to some respect, it can be done as a good thing. There are some reputable companies out there that do it for legitimate and good purposes, but there are others out there that do it for nefarious purposes. So yeah, I would definitely look into utilizing Chrome or using Brave.
Okay.
There was one more question that came up on the chat. Someone said, is it recommended that you save your passwords to iCloud? So depends on how you save your information to iCloud. I know that iCloud is Apple's solution for what they call cloud storage, information stored up in the cloud. We can talk about that at another time. It should be fairly good. I think all cloud-based storage systems are encrypted storage so that no one can get access to it. The one reason why I don't necessarily recommend it as an option is because it doesn't get you past the point of generating complex passwords and being able to easily access them and pull them and integrate it in. So the reason why a lot of times we use the same password is because it's easy to remember. It's this tension between, I want to be secure, but I don't want to lose my convenience, right? And so if you have to log into iCloud every time to go look up a password, it's probably going to be inconvenient. And it's going to drive your behavior to say, I don't want to use a complex password. I'm just going to reuse the same password. What LastPass does, and things like passwords managers do, is that they kind of take away a lot of that excuse and a lot of that inconvenience and make it more convenient and provide you this level of security. So definitely you can store it there, but I would recommend utilizing a solution like LastPass or some other password managers out there so that you can get the best of both worlds. And there was another question, passwords are saved to keychain or for Apple, same as LastPass. Yeah, okay. Yeah, so I've seen that before. I've seen people have a keychain that they carry around with them that kind of is their password. I've seen that as well. LastPass stores everything in the cloud, and you can actually make a backup. I actually do that. I have a safe, an actual fireproof safe where I back up all my data from the cloud. I back up all my passwords and I keep that there in case for some reason I can't get access to the internet. So you can actually make a backup of all of your information from LastPass and put in secured safely. Which brings me actually to another point I want to bring to another good way to secure yourself. Tina, you were talking about some of that is, if any of you all get affected with ransomware, the best way to remedy ransomware is to make sure you make a backup of all your data and your systems. Because that's the leverage that attackers that use ransomware have on you, is that they can basically block you from getting access to your data, which makes your life miserable. Well, if I have all my data, I don't care. Just reinstall my operating system and put that, or get a new computer and just put my data. The computer is worthless compared to the data. The data and the memories and the pictures and the information, that is what's super vital, right? That's what you really want to protect. So I highly recommend many people, if you're an avid user of a computer and you store a lot of data, back your data up on a separate drive and put it in a secure location. Like I said, I have mine, I put it all in external hard drives. Absolutely. Yes, absolutely, Tina. Back that information up. They have tons of programs out there that literally will take an entire image of your entire system, from the operating system, all your programs, everything. And if your system gets infected, you can just wipe it clean and start over and come right back to where you left off. And that is one of the most fundamental and phenomenal ways to recover from a ransomware attack. And you don't have to worry about spending $300-400 to try to get your data back. All right. So I think we've kind of went over a little bit, but I definitely wanted to make sure I answered any more questions. I want to say thank you all for really just coming in and listening. I hope that you really gotten something out of this. I really have a passion for just, really telling people how to protect themselves, because we are going to continue to use these systems in the foreseeable future. Not just because of COVID, but just because of the way we operate as a nation, as a people. And I truly believe that everything is created by God. The devil likes to try to come in and misuse God's creation, but everything that is created is of God. And we can use these systems to really, truly bring glory to God in a way that has been phenomenal. If you think about the reach that the gospel now has all over the world in an instantaneous moment when we share a video about our testimony. But we want to make sure that we're doing it in a way that we're safe and secure, that we're protecting our families, our loved ones, our assets. And that's really the spirit of this talk. So thank you all so much for joining. I believe this is being recorded And so we'll try to see if maybe we can make the recording available. And also I will provide a PDF copy of these slides to everyone. All right. So thank you all very much. Have a wonderful day. Have a wonderful weekend. And God bless everyone.
Thanks, same to you.
All right.
Thank you, Eric.
Bye-bye.
Awesome.
Great job, Eric. This was
Thank you.
amazing.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thanks for the info, Eric.
You're very, very welcome. You're very welcome.
Thank you so much. It was awesome.
You're awesome. You're welcome. Take care.
Great job, and I'm looking for some solutions for the Mac side.
Oh, we got those. Mac's pretty good, Apostle Johnson. They've done a great job. We'll definitely take a look at that. But they've done a great job of securing the system just inherently. So you're pretty secure. But we'll definitely look into that.
Yeah, because I was looking at the recommendation that you made. What is it? LastPass, and it says an issue with Apple. That's all.
Oh, okay. Well, we can look into that. Yeah, there's other ones out there. So maybe what I can do is do a research and see if we can find one that's more compatible with Apple's products.
Okay.
All right.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You're very, very welcome. Thank you so much for joining. We appreciate it. All right. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.